Well, hello, good evening. I'm going to give you a somewhat biased and purely subjective crash course into NFTs as an artist who has been playing with them for quite a long time. I'm going to very quickly explain what they are and we can move on. So let's start. An NFT stands for non-fungible token. And this little quadrangle explains it quite nicely. So you can see on the bottom right, the car and the painting and the house, that's a tangible, real thing, but it's also non-fungible. Like if I have a copy of the Mona Lisa and I chop it in half, I don't have two multi-million-pound paintings. I have a worthless thing. Whereas if you look at the gold and the money, you can chop that up. So if I've got a £50 note, I can turn it into five £10 notes, and it still has the same value. So a intangible, fungible would be an example of something like Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency, where you can do money-like things and you can divide it up and split it out and share it and use it. But it is in and of itself can be broken down. So that leaves us to the bottom left there, which is a non-fungible token. So what that basically means is a thing that is unique and cannot be broken down, but it's intangible in this case. So it's not like a house or a car. It tends to be a digital file, and that's what NFTs are. So a little background. NFTs in some ways solve one of the problems with digital art, which is if I create an artwork in a digital form, it is inherently infinitely reproducible. You can look back to the days of Napster when people realized that they could upload MP3s and share them amongst each other for free. That fundamentally upset the music industry because you've taken what was previously a tangible physical object from like a CD and turned it into a digital asset that can be copied and shared. And artistically, this points to the ideas of Walter Benjamin, which is as soon as photography occurred, that kind of set the cat amongst the pigeons for artists, because you end up with a multiple reproducible image. And that's fundamentally different from the traditional kind of auratic power of a singular physical object like a painting. And for digital art, it's even worse, right? Because we put this stuff on the internet and anyone can get at it. And there's not any real way to say that this particular work is mine. And that's where NFTs step in. So you'll have undoubtedly heard stories about lots and lots of money sloshing around. The Beeple sale was probably the most notable publicly, which was a collection of 3D renders by Beeple in a big bundle that he sold as an NFT, and then Christie's got in on it as well and sold it again, and a lot of money moved around. One of the aspects of NFTs is that I would argue the artistic aspect of it is somewhat secondary to the cultural ramifications of NFT. So here we can see Nyan Cat, the classic GIF, was sold by its creator for 300 Ether, which is a cryptocurrency, which at the time translated to about $600,000. That may seem absurd to you, but that's the nature of NFTs. So at their core, the idea of an NFT is a record on the blockchain. And I'm sure some of you have heard of the blockchain and blockchain currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum. In simple terms, a blockchain is a decentralized ledger. It's a big book of records where everyone writes everything down and everyone can look at the same book and nothing is ever deleted. So if you compare it to something like a traditional database, if you imagine Facebook, everything you post on Facebook is a record and it lives at Facebook, and Facebook decide who gets to see it and what happens to it. Whereas with a blockchain, you mark something in the blockchain and everyone in the world can look at it. And so this allows us as artists to put a record in the ledger to say, I created an artwork today and I'm going to mark it and it's mine. It exists now. And a non-fungible token is effectively a link to that record. So here's an example of a NFT for a series I created last November, and it effectively manifests as a rendition of the digital file on screen with some supporting text like you would in a gallery, and it can be traded. So you probably can't see it very clearly in the bottom corner there, but there's a history of the activity of this NFT. So at the bottom, you can see I minted it. I created it on this one. Yeah, this one was in March. So I minted it in March and I swapped it out and offered it for sale. And my friend Mario immediately bought it for 1 Tez. This is probably my first NFT sale on Tezos. From an artistic perspective, there is some fascinatingly great art out on the NFT scene. And I think much of the discussion and public discussion is around the kind of absurdity of crypto apes or pixel punks, or kind of this, what is not traditional artwork, changing hands for lots of money. But there is some good stuff out there. And I think we should not lose sight that there is art in the NFT space, despite what the press may say. So when I buy an NFT, what am I actually buying? I'm buying a till receipt. I'm buying a record on this blockchain that says Eric Drass currently owns this picture. And that record cannot be changed. So at this point in time, Eric Drass is recorded as owning it. But I don't actually own the asset per se, the picture or the video or whatever it is. That's not inherently part of the blockchain. What's in the blockchain is a pointer to a place on the internet where it lives. So all it's saying is this is a record of ownership. In and of itself, it's not a physical object. It's not like getting a painting and hanging it on your wall. It's more like getting a till receipt for a painting. And obviously the issue with digital art is that you can save it, right? So why would I pay $20,000 for an image that I can just download from the internet? That cuts to the very core of the NFT, because what you're saying is, by owning this thing, I am the owner and I therefore imbue value into this system. And that's something that's been lacking quite a lot in digital art, because generally people post it for free and there's not many opportunities to sell, but NFTs stepped in. So if we look at this little history, this is a history of that Quasimodo piece that we just showed. If you start from the bottom to the top, you can see that he created 3 of them, 3 editions. And what's interesting from an artist's point of view is that when you create or mint your NFT, you can assign what's known as a smart contract to it. And in this case, the contract is that whenever this NFT sells, the originator, in this case Mario, gets 15% of that sale forever. So you can see, if you work from the bottom to the top, that he originally listed it at 75, and then subsequently it sold for more and more money. And at the top, the last transaction there sold for 250. Each of those transactions, Mario, as the artist, gets a 15% kickback. So not only do you have this chain of provenance, so you can see who originated this work, whose hands it has been through, but the artists themselves, is baked into the system, is a kickback for the artist, which is quite different from the traditional art world, where you sell your painting for £500 and then after you die, someone makes 50 million out of it. The artist doesn't really get kickback on that. So what we're doing here is basically creating artificial rarity. We're taking a digital file that is inherently reproducible, and saying, no, I'm going to make it rare. I'm going to say there are only 1 of these, or only an edition of 10 of them. As I say, it's artificial. It's not like the Superman comic, right? There's only so many of those that physically survive, and that's dictated by people losing them and spilling water on them. An NFT is just a record of that idea of rarity. So when I first started minting NFTs, I was using the Ethereum blockchain, It's worth noting here that there are different places where you can mint your NFT. There's not one blockchain. There are multiple blockchains. We'll probably touch on that later. Ethereum is probably the biggest and has the greatest coverage and value in terms of NFT records. But it has this downside that it's a system that uses a lot of energy in its production. And Memo, Atken, and others, artists, looked into this to find out quite what the ramifications are. And it turns out that by minting an NFT, by putting it on the blockchain, has an enormous carbon footprint. The example here is that minting an NFT is the equivalent to flying for 1,500 hours or boiling a kettle 3.5 million times just to list your artwork. And morally, that feels bad. I don't want to be in a system that's burning that much energy just so I can be part of the market. And then luckily, there are alternatives, what are known as clean NFTs, that don't use the same horrific amounts of energy. You don't have to burn a rainforest every time you make an artwork. As a comparison, the blockchain that I use personally, Tezos, to mint a picture as an NFT on the Tezos chain is the equivalent to flicking the kettle on and off for 1 second. So that's significantly different than the thousands of hours that Ethereum burns. So I think, for me personally, morally, that's quite an important issue, is that if we're going to play this game, let's not destroy the planet while we're doing it. So as I mentioned, my first NFTs were a series of cryptocurrencies, which are generative pieces created from a neural network that I trained on 50,000 banknotes, and is a kind of slight dig at the crypto scene. I also minted some other generative work. This is a neural network that I trained on Francis Bacon paintings. So none of these actual Francis Bacon paintings exist. They were dreamt up by my network. And more recently, a series of generative works based around the image sequences of Edward Muybridge from the 1890s. Practically speaking, as an artist, one of the issues about the NFT scene is you've got to sell them, right? Listing it, just simply minting an NFT doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it. You have to go out and sell it, which means you have to engage with the buyers. And personally, and I think I speak for a number of artists, that whoring out your own work is one of the most painful things to do in the world, particularly because NFTs were getting a big kickback of heat about their eco footprint. So to put your hand up and saying, "Hey, I've made an NFT, come and buy it," and 80% of your followers go, "I hate you, you're burning the planet." So finding a market and hustling your work is inherently part of running an NFT. Underneath that is the market is cruel, right? This is a chart of NFT sales for a couple of months, and you can see that it's quite up and down, so you don't even know if there's any buyers out there. And because you're using a cryptocurrency to trade these things, the value of the actual currency goes up and down. So that NFT that you sold for $1,000 today could be worth $500 tomorrow. So you'd have like $500 in your account, or you could have 2,000. I don't know. There's a huge volatility in crypto, so it's quite divorced from normal currency. So what's really happening is that artworks are being used as assets, right? So kind of asset class artwork is the paintings and sculptures you hear that sell for millions and millions of dollars. People aren't really hanging those on their wall. They're putting them in a free port and then hanging onto them and selling them again at Christie's a few years later and moving it to another free port. There's the actual artistic value of the work is not the thing. And NFTs are fascinating because it brings that to the surface for every artist, is that much as you want to think people are buying your art because they love it, currently a lot of the market is about people buying stuff so they can sell it again quickly and make some money. And so they just use it as an asset. And that results in some very strange things being posted. And there's a whole different culture based on the kind of things that NFTs sell. And they're slightly different from the fine art world. So very quickly, the gist of it is that it's creating this artificial rarity. And historically, the most valuable artists are the dead ones, right? And that's how it works. To be a good artist, to make money, you have to make some work, sell it for nothing, and then die. And if we look at something like the Salvador Mundi, which sold for $450 million, the art critics and art historians aren't even sure that it's a Da Vinci. But the market has dictated that this object is a Da Vinci and has an incredible value to it, even though no one really knows whether Da Vinci painted it or not. Now, if Da Vinci had minted it on the blockchain, there would be a complete record of every single person who had had that painting, dating all the way back to Da Vinci painting in the first place. And obviously for valuation of whether something is a fake or not, that's incredibly valuable. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of the kind of conceptual ideas of NFTs are quite interesting for fine art once we get over the hype about all the money. And the gist of it is, again, I'm probably speaking personally, I find artists tend to have quite an uncomfortable relationship with money. They'd like to have some, and they don't quite know how to get it. And usually there are gatekeepers who decide whether your art is worth money or not. Playing that game is a whole thing. And NFTs have liberated us in some ways. So it's about the work that I can create myself can be put on the market directly. And I have to deal with, the capitalistic ramifications of that. But I'm going to leave on the note of my good friend Zen Bullets, who says that if it makes money, it's not art. And I'm going to leave it there. So I think that's the that's my launch off point. If it makes money, it's not art.